Years ago, I attended a ministry seminar that left its mark on me. The speaker paused mid-message and said, most young people who feel called to ministry end up backsliding, not because they've lost their faith, because it's the only way they know how to fit back into the youth group that they have kind of grown out of. So they begin to grow, they want more, they don't get it, and they have to backslide just to stay close with their friends. And I knew exactly what this guy was talking about. I just returned from a missions trip to Mexico, fired up, eager to serve, ready for more. And for years I had been critical of all ministries, but especially the junior high ministry around me. But now I felt led and called to help. And so I asked the youth leader if I could teach a lesson, set everyone straight in one lesson. He smiled and said, come and observe this week. Well, 1 week became 2, and then 3, and before long, 6 months had gone by, but I was hooked. I loved it, and I loved junior high ministry. So I asked again, hey, is it time for me to teach? Can I teach? And this time, he threw a challenge out to me. He said, Steve, the students are already beginning to see you as one of the leaders. So am I. But if you're going to lead, if you're going to be a junior high leader, then you need to start showing up every Sunday morning. So I told him what really, really good spiritual Christians do during these times. I said, hey, I'll pray about it, which translated from the Christianese means probably not, get off my back. Okay? But that week in youth group, I mentioned it as a prayer request. And one girl, she looked straight at me and said, if Jesus can rise from the dead for you, you can rise out of bed on Sunday mornings for him. Those words did pierce me. I didn't laugh, I laugh now. But I knew what I had to do. The decision was clear. Saying yes to the call, that call for junior high ministry, and rising out of bed on Sunday mornings is why I'm here today, even though I'm jet lagged. I have risen. The Lord has risen me indeed. Now, maybe you haven't served in junior high ministry, but I think you've felt that same tension, right? That tug between staying with the crowd, keeping with your friends in nice, sweet, warm fellowship, and stepping out into something more that might be a little bit lonely. We've all been there. At some point, we felt God stirring something deeper in us, prompting us to step out, to serve, to lead, whatever it is. But then the excuses well up within us, don't they? Yeah, I'm a bit busy. Oh, I'm not ready. I'm not quite spiritual enough yet. And my favorite, let me pray about that. And then we settle back into the crowd, right? Comfortable, unnoticed, unchallenged, great fellowship, but we get soft. And even in the church, we can fall into this pattern. We tolerate critics of ministry, but rarely challenge and train them. We cater to the consumers, but don't always call them forward. We talk a lot about being with Jesus, but not as much about being sent by him. But here's the good news. Jesus is not content to leave you in the crowd. He wants more from you, but he's not going to push you. He's going to call you into it. And we have a choice. We can respond and step out, be part of his leadership team, so to speak, or we can chill out with the rest of the crowd. Step out or chill out. It's completely up to us because God honors us and he honors our decision. So with this decision in mind, let's crack open Mark chapter 3, verses 1 to 19. Take a look at it. We're going to see Jesus moves us from the crowd and calls us out to the core. And in doing so, he confronts critics, he gathers consumers, and he commissions committed disciples. So let's take a look at this. Mark 3, 1 to 19. This is so nice, Gene, to have this right here. It says this. It's right here in front of me. Another time, Jesus went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus. So they watched him closely to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand up in front of everyone." Then Jesus asked them, which is lawful on the Sabbath? To do good or to do evil? To save a life or to kill? But they remained silent. He looked around at them in anger and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts, said to the man, stretch out your hand. He stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. Then the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus. Jesus went up on a mountainside and called to them those he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12 that they might be with him. Hey, I skipped some verses, didn't I?
I did that, sorry.
Okay, there we go. Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the lake, and a large crowd from Galilee followed. When they heard about all he was doing, many people came to him from Judea, Jerusalem, Idumea, and the regions across the Jordan around Tyre and Sidon. Because of the crowd, he told his disciples to have a small boat ready for him to keep the people from crowding him. For he had healed so many so that those with diseases were pushing forward to touch him. Whenever the impure spirits saw him, they fell down before him and cried out, "You are the Son of God!" But he gave them strict orders not to tell others about him. Now Jesus went up on a mountainside and called to him those he wanted, and they came to him. He appointed 12 that they might be with him, and that he might send them out to preach and to have authority to drive out demons. These are the 12 he appointed: Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter; James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. To them he gave the name Boanerges, which means sons of thunder; Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. There's a lot there, but this passage shows us that every Christian can move from being a passive spectator to an active disciple by responding to Jesus's invitation to move from the crowd to the core. Jet lag. I'm blaming jet lag. Two types of people make up the crowds around us in this passage: curious critics and casual consumers. Yep. That's what I went to seminary for. Wait, there's more. Curious critics and casual consumers. Jesus sifts through the crowds and gathers the called out core to get on mission for him. So we have the curious critics, the casual consumers, and the called out core. 4 years of seminary put to good use. So let's take a look at the curious critics in verses 1 to 6. Notice in the passage, it's in it's there in the yellow in verse 2. It says that some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus. See, they weren't like the others in the crowd. They weren't there to worship. They weren't there to hear Jesus' teaching. They were looking to criticize. They were looking for problems. They were watching closely, waiting for Jesus to slip up. Now, what's ironic about all this is their attempt to trap him confirms that, hey, he does indeed have the power to heal. Right? They weren't arguing with that. But let's see if he can do it on the Sabbath. They weren't bright enough to stop and think, wait a minute, this guy can heal, and he's making these bold claims. I wonder if there's truth to his words, and if we should submit to them. No. They got upset. Instead, they were coming to church, so to speak, looking for a way to criticize the pastor. Right? That happens in our place too, doesn't it? Yeah. It's interesting that this is the only place in the Bible that I'm aware of where Jesus initiates healing without being asked. And almost to the point of frustration, right? He's upset, and he looks at the guy and he says, "Stretch out your hand." And the guy does it. The guy didn't ask for healing. Jesus initiated this healing to confront the hypocrisy of the religious elite. It's also ironic that while Jesus is doing good on the Sabbath, the religious leaders are planning to kill. That's why he asks, what's better, to do good on the Sabbath or to kill? To save a life or kill it? Ooh, he nailed him. And that just made them even angrier. And I find it interesting that they plot with Gentiles, the Herodians, to find a way to kill Jesus, to take him out, to vote him out of the pulpit, so to speak. I realize you guys are not trying to vote me out. I'm just using an illustration. Criticism doesn't always come from outside of the church. It can come from inside as well. We need to be prepared for that as we minister to other churches. At the same time, not everyone in the crowd is a critic. Some are not looking to trap Jesus. They're just looking for help. They're hurting. They're desperate. They're intrigued. They've heard stories that Jesus can heal, that Jesus can make things better. Maybe they've seen a miracle or two. And so they come not to challenge him, but to consume what he has to offer. And so they come from every direction: Judea, Jerusalem, Idumea, beyond the Jordan. Some are Jews, some are Gentiles. It is a cross-cultural crowd drawn in by the power of Jesus. But here's the tension. While their need brings them close, their curiosity doesn't necessarily lead to commitment. And so let's take a look at this second group. They're the casual consumers in verses 7 to 12. See, it says in verse 8, when they heard all that he was doing, many people came to him from Judea, Jerusalem, Idumea, and the regions across the Jordan and around the Tyre and Sidon. In other words, from everywhere, all over the place, they're coming, cross-culturally, a diverse, massive crowd. And what's their motivation? They came for the miracles, not the man. They came for what the church could do for them. Even the demons showed up. And they cried out about Jesus' identity, but he silences them. Why? These guys are not the appropriate heralds for me. I don't want demons proclaiming who I am. They're acknowledging my greatness, but they're rejecting my authority. So they need to be quiet. How many of us in church do the same? How many in the crowds do the same? We sing the worship songs every Sunday morning. We love what Jesus can do for us, but are we going to acknowledge his authority in our lives? Well, that depends. That depends. What's it going to cost me? Jesus can have authority over my life on Sunday mornings, but Monday through Saturday, I don't want him messing with my schedule. I definitely don't want him messing with my bank account, and I don't want him messing with my relationships. Yikes. Jesus didn't come just to draw a crowd. He is not content just to have people admire him from a distance or receive blessings without transformation. He doesn't care about building an audience. He's building an army for the spiritual conflict that is upon us. And so in the middle of the crowd's noise and needs, Jesus withdraws. He gets away from them. They're just using me. Man, how many times have I been guilty of that in my prayer time, where I'm asking God for something? I'm fasting to get something. And like I talked about a couple weeks ago, I'm not fasting or worshiping just to be in his presence. And I hear God's voice tell me, Steve, you're just using me. I mean, sometimes it feels really spiritual. I remember in Nepal, we had about 2,000 young people coming for a camp that we put together. How we pulled that off, I don't know. That was God, but we did it. And I'm sitting there, I'm praying, Lord, make this great. And I hear his voice, make the camp great or make you great? I'm confused. Steve, what exactly do you want from me? Oh my. So Jesus has had enough at this point, and he withdraws to get away from the crowd. He climbs up a mountain, not to escape, but to call. And so from the sea of consumers, he notices and selects a core of committed followers that want more. May that be us. And so it's not based on popularity or performance on their part, but rather purpose. He sets them apart. That's our word, sanctify, sanctification, set apart for a purpose. And so he calls them to himself, not just to be near him, not just to be changed, but also to be sent out by him. And this brings us to the third and most important group, the called out core. In verses 13 to 19, and I believe it's in verse 14, right? Well, I'll read 13. Jesus went up on a mountainside, and he called to him those he wanted, and they came to him, and he appointed 12 that they might be with him and that he might send them out to preach and to have authority to drive out demons. And so these 12, probably a precursor, not necessarily to their apostleship, but to those who are called to fish for people, right? Just like the other 70 later in Luke chapter 10 in another gospel. This is the precursor. The 12 already have this heart. They want more, and Jesus gathers them because he knows if he doesn't gather them, they're going to backslide to be part of the crowd. I don't know how many of you have ever popped popcorn before. Do you remember the old, the Jiffy popcorn things, right? You put them on the stove and you heat it up, and all those kernels, they pop up at once, right, at the same time? No, they don't. They don't. They pop up to the top. The first ones pop first, and if I don't gather that popcorn off the top, what happens to the rest? The bottom burns. And if I don't gather the popcorn, the whole thing eventually burns. Jesus knows this. He's built an environment for the last 1.5 years or so, and he notices these guys are popping to the top. They want more. It's time to gather them, and so he appoints them to be with him, to experience a deeper relationship with him. He wants his character to rub off on them. Have you ever spent so much time with someone that you can kind of complete their sentences before they do? This happens in marriage all the time, right? I've had the same best friend since 3rd grade, and we would sit in class. He'd snap his fingers and be like, hey. He'd point at something and be like, I'd point back and he'd be like, oh, totally. No words. And people are like, how do you guys do that? And we would joke, we share the same brain, which explains why we never did well in math, because neither one of us had a whole brain to work with. But anyway, so with Jesus, the intent is that we spend so much time with him, so much of his character rubs off on him, that we know his thoughts, and his thoughts become our thoughts. We share one spirit, not just one brain, but one spirit with him. This is a turning point in Jesus' ministry. He has been modeling the ministry to them. He stands up with the man with the shriveled hand. He confronts the authorities, and he says to the man, stretch out your hand. We know from later in Mark chapter 6 that healing is part of this commission. We don't see it here, but we do know that healing is part of it. But here Jesus is emphasizing, you are entering the kingdom of darkness, and I am commissioning you to preach and to drive out the darkness, to drive out demons. This is not just a special ministry for the 12, because we see it, as I already mentioned, in Luke chapter 10, in another gospel, later in Jesus' ministry. This is a ministry for all the 70 as well. In other words, it is for us. It is for those who are willing to respond to Jesus' invitation to come and fish for people. Because we step out and preach for him, represent him, take up his authority, and step into that darkness, the darkness is going to push back. And we can shrink from it and cower, or we can push through it. Keep moving with the light forward. So Jesus appoints these guys not just to be with him, but to proclaim, to preach, and to cast out demons, to take up his spiritual authority. In other words, it's not just about being with Jesus, kumbaya, my Lord, let's have a time of sweet, warm fellowship, but it's about being on mission with Jesus. We love being with Jesus. We're not so keen on being sent out by him. And yet, I would say to you that you cannot truly be with Jesus and remain uninvolved in what he cares about. I've said it a bunch of times, I'm going to say it again. Where is Jesus? Well, he's God, he's everywhere. But his manifest, concentrated presence is dead smack in the middle of the Great Commission. And that's where he's calling us to be. If we really want to be with Jesus, if we really believe the songs that we're singing on Sunday morning, we're going to jump out there and we're going to go for it. We're going to drop our nets like the disciples and we're going to get out there and fish for people. So these names that are mentioned in the passage, the 12, they're not random. James and John would become key leaders. Of course, Peter, we're familiar with him. He's kind of the leader of everyone. And interesting, there's Judas Iscariot, already known by the time this is penned, that he was the betrayer. And scholars believe that that word Iscariot represents a specific region that he may have been from in Judea. In other words, he was the only non-Galilean that was called. That's kind of interesting. There's something special about the number 12 that's being called out. It's a throwback, a reminder to the 12 tribes of Israel. Jewish people hearing these words being spoken in a congregation would think immediately, oh, Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel. And it's very significant that Jesus is not one of the 12. He stands apart from the 12 as the divine caller, synonymous with Yahweh himself. As Yahweh built the 12 tribes in the Old Testament, Yahweh, Jesus, Yeshua, is calling the 12 and building this new movement. Very interesting, very powerful. This means the mission is important. It's not an afterthought. It is central to the heart of God. So the next question becomes deeply personal. Where do you see yourself in this story, in this passage? Are you watching from the crowd? Or are you popping to the surface, to the top, ready for more? Ready for Jesus to gather you in? Responding to his invitation to make disciples who make disciples who make disciples. There are only three places to stand in this passage. With the critics, observing, analyzing, resisting. With the consumers, we're here for the benefits, but not the lordship. Or do you stand with the called out core, committed to be with Jesus and sent by him? Where are you? Who do you stand with? Maybe you have been curious for a long time, over the last several years, with speakers like Preston, Bruce, others, maybe even inspired by their words, but not yet committed. Maybe you've followed from a distance, but you've avoided being discipled or sent out. There's good news for you. Jesus isn't giving up on you. He's still calling you. Not because you're perfect, but because he's perfect. He's perfect. Not because you're ready, but because he is committed to equipping you. We are praying people equipped by Jesus to impact this world for the next. That's who Interlink is. And imagine if as Interlink we moved beyond the crowd. When I say the crowd, I mean the crowd at large. Think of Ashland, the churches in Ashland. Beyond the crowd, and we truly step into this calling of Jesus' core. What would that look like for us? What if Interlink wasn't just a gathering of the saints, but it was a launching pad for ministry? Not just a place to come and see, but a place where people come to be built up, equipped, and sent out. Interlink can become a place where critics are transformed into the committed, consumers are transformed into contributors, and the called become co-laborers in Christ's mission. The harvest is ready, the call is going out. Do we want more? Are we rising up? Responding to Jesus' invitation, ready for him to gather us. And so Jesus climbed up the mountain in this passage at that time to call this group, this core individuals, to change the world. But there's another mountain he climbed up called Calvary. And he climbed up this mountain to die on a cross so that every critic could be silenced, every demon defeated, and our sins, the price for our sins, paid so that we could be gathered into his core. See, we are called not because we're qualified. We're qualified because he was crucified. And he rose from the dead for you. The least we can do, or I can do, is rise out of bed and step away from the crowd for him. Let's pray together.